I used to believe that family was everything, that no matter how cruel the outside world became, your blood would always have your back. That was before my sister, Vanessa, taught me otherwise. For most of my life, we were inseparable. Two sisters, growing up in a privileged household, daughters of Robert Whitmore, the founder and CEO of Whitmore Industries, a multi-million-dollar company built from the ground up. Our childhood was filled with expensive vacations, private schools, and endless opportunities. But even then, Vanessa always felt like she was living in my shadow. I was the ambitious one. The one who graduated at the top of my class, earned the respect of our father, and dedicated my life to the family business. Vanessa, on the other hand, cared more about social circles, lavish parties, and appearances. Despite our differences, I never saw her as competition. I was too busy proving myself at Whitmore Industries. I climbed the ranks the hard way, never asking for favors. I spent sleepless nights perfecting projects, handled crisis after crisis, and earned the loyalty of our employees. By the time our father announced his retirement, everyone assumed I would be his successor, including me. I still remember the night he gathered us for dinner at his estate. "It's time for me to step down," Dad said, his voice heavy with emotion. "And I'm proud to announce that Olivia will be taking over as CEO." Vanessa smiled politely, but her eyes burned with something darker. That night, she barely spoke to me. Weeks later, the cracks began to show. At first, it was subtle. Vanessa would undermine me during family gatherings, making snide remarks about my leadership. "Running a company is more about charm than spreadsheets," she'd say with a fake laugh. I ignored her. I thought she was just jealous. Harmless. I couldn't have been more wrong. Behind my back, Vanessa was scheming. She had grown close to Ethan Cole, our company's COO, and, more painfully, my ex. We dated years ago, but things ended badly. Ethan was ruthless, cold, and cared only about power. Vanessa, ever manipulative, saw an opportunity. Together, they devised a plan to push me out. They began slowly poisoning my father's mind, whispering that I was too rigid, too cold, too obsessed with control. They painted me as the villain who couldn't connect with people, someone who would drive the company into the ground. Meanwhile, Vanessa played the doting daughter who cared about family values and modernizing the business. Ethan backed every word she said, making their lies seem credible. I remained oblivious until it was too late. One morning, my world collapsed. I was called into an emergency board meeting. Sitting across from me were faces I knew well, executives I had mentored, partners I trusted. But that day, they wouldn't meet my eyes. Vanessa and Ethan were there too, smug and composed. "Olivia," the chairman began, clearing his throat, awkwardly. "Serious concerns have been raised about your management style and recent decisions." I was blindsided. "What concerns?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Ethan slid a thick folder across the table. Inside were falsified documents, edited emails, and twisted narratives designed to make me look incompetent and borderline reckless. "This isn't true," I said, my voice cracking. Vanessa just leaned back, arms crossed, watching like a predator toying with its prey. "It's what the board believes," she said coldly. Within hours, I was suspended pending investigation. By the end of the week, I was asked to resign for the good of the company. My father, humiliated and manipulated, didn't even call me. I packed my office in silence, my heart shattered. Vanessa didn't even have the decency to avoid me. She waited outside my office as I carried the last box. "It's nothing personal, Olivia," she said with fake sympathy. "You just weren't right for the job." I wanted to scream, to claw at her smug face, but I didn't. Not because I was weak, but because in that very moment, something inside me snapped. She thought she won. She thought she had destroyed me. But I knew something she didn't. Before they locked me out of the system, I had backed up everything. Years of financial reports, confidential emails, and, most importantly, Ethan's private correspondences, which I was copied on during our relationship and never deleted from my archive. Vanessa and Ethan had secrets, dirty secrets, deals made under the table, funds siphoned discreetly. Nepotism, favoritism, and unethical decisions that could ruin reputations if exposed. That night, Sitting in my tiny apartment surrounded by unopened boxes and silence, I stared at my laptop. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't broken. I was plotting. Vanessa didn't just take my job. She took my family's trust, my dignity, and tried to erase me. She made herself my enemy. And if she wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. I closed my laptop and smiled for the first time in days. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The days after my fall from Whitmore Industries felt like a blur. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't waking up to board meetings, deadlines, and endless calls. Instead, I woke up to silence. Crushing, unbearable silence. At first, I thought it would break me. Being forced out of the company I had poured my heart into and losing my father's trust had created a void so deep it threatened to swallow me whole. But pain has a funny way of sharpening your focus. While Vanessa paraded around the media as the new visionary leader of the company, I spent my days dissecting everything they had done to me. I wasn't stupid. I knew Ethan was the mastermind. Behind the paperwork, the doctored emails, and the false narratives that made me look incompetent. But Vanessa? Her betrayal cut the deepest. She was my sister. Someone I defended countless times growing up. Someone I thought would always be in my corner. I underestimated how far she would go to claim what she believed was rightfully hers. That realization flipped a switch inside me. I stopped grieving and started planning. Late into the nights, I went through every file I had backed up. Financial, records, private emails, Ethan's careless messages from when we were dating, filled with arrogant comments about cutting corners and playing the board like chess pieces. Even Vanessa had slipped up in her emails, complaining about dealing with the old man and how Olivia never knew how to play dirty. The deeper I dug, the more gold I found. They weren't just unethical, they were stupidly reckless. Ethan had created dummy shell companies to divert funds from joint ventures. Vanessa approved expensive, unnecessary consulting contracts to her close friends, bleeding the company dry while selling the narrative of cutting costs. They weren't saving Whitmore Industries. They were looting it. I realized then that I didn't just want revenge. I had a duty to stop them before they destroyed everything my father built. But storming in with evidence wasn't an option. They held the power, the board, and the narrative. If I went public too soon, they would spin it as bitterness or lies. No, I needed to strike with precision. So I did what Vanessa and Ethan never expected. I started playing the long game. The first step was rebuilding alliances. I reached out to former colleagues who had quietly left after my ousting. People who respected me and hated the direction Vanessa had taken the company. Many were eager to talk. They shared horror stories. Mass layoffs without cause, budgets slashed recklessly, and departments forced to hit impossible targets to make quarterly reports look good. Morale was dead. Fear ruled the halls of Whitmore Industries. I recorded every conversation, every testimony. These weren't just gossip, they were ammunition. Next, I contacted suppliers and former partners who had been pushed out in favor of Vanessa's personal connections. Unsurprisingly, many were furious and more than willing to provide documentation of shady deals and unethical contract breaches. Within weeks, I built a case so damning it could bury them both. Still, I waited. Timing mattered. I needed Vanessa and Ethan to feel untouchable, to let their guard down completely. That moment came faster than I thought. Midway through the fiscal year, Whitmore Industries announced record profits. Vanessa and Ethan went on a PR tour, bragging about revolutionary leadership and streamlining operations. Behind the curtain, however, I knew the truth. They had slashed costs so brutally that product quality had nosedived. Customer complaints skyrocketed. Returns doubled. Investors, blinded by short-term gains, didn't see the cracks yet, but they would. And I was ready to widen those cracks into a chasm. I reached out discreetly to a trusted journalist, someone known for tearing apart corporate facades with brutal precision. I fed them everything: documents, emails, interviews. The journalist spent weeks verifying every detail. Once they were satisfied, they promised to release the exposé at the most devastating moment possible, right before Whitmore Industries' annual shareholder meeting. In the meantime, I didn't sit idle. I began leaking smaller, less damaging stories to stir the waters. Anonymous tips about toxic workplace culture, mass resignations, and poor management began surfacing across forums and social media. Employees and ex-staff chimed in, sharing their experiences. A movement quietly grew. By the time the shareholder meeting approached, the company's once sterling image was badly tarnished. Vanessa and Ethan were too arrogant to notice. They brushed off the growing unrest as jealous noise from disgruntled former employees. Their blind confidence made my victory inevitable. The night before the exposé dropped, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was nervous, but because I knew that by morning, everything would change. At exactly 8 a.m., headlines exploded across every major business news site. Whitmore Industries CEO Vanessa Whitmore and COO Ethan Cole accused of fraud and mismanagement. The article pulled no punches. Every dirty detail was exposed. Funds siphoned, fake contracts, lies to investors, suppressed safety concerns, screenshots of Ethan bragging to me during our relationship about manipulating the board were included, alongside Vanessa's emails mocking my father and staff. The story went viral within hours. Stock prices tanked, clients cut ties instantly. And just as I planned, the board, panicked and furious, called for an emergency meeting. I watched from my apartment, sipping coffee as my enemies were publicly torn apart. Vanessa tried to spin the story, claiming it was all lies, but no one listened. Ethan was caught trying to delete files when investigators stormed the headquarters. By sunset, both were suspended indefinitely, pending legal investigations. I didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't the end. I knew what came next. With the company in shambles and no clear leadership, they would come crawling. And when they did, I would be ready. Not as the Olivia they betrayed, but as the only one who could save them. The fallout from the exposé was swift and brutal. By noon the next day, Whitmore Industries' stock had plummeted by nearly 30%. Investors, terrified of being tied to a sinking ship, began pulling out. Clients terminated contracts in droves. Lawsuits flooded in, faster than the legal team could process them. The once untouchable empire my father built was hanging by a thread, and Vanessa, my sister, was at the center of it all. I watched it unfold quietly. No public statements, no media interviews. I let the chaos speak for itself. Vanessa and Ethan tried desperately to control the narrative. Press conferences, damage control emails, carefully worded apologies, all of it fell flat. No one bought their carefully crafted lies anymore. The public had seen the real them. Meanwhile, the board of directors panicked. They were being blamed too, for negligence, for letting Vanessa run unchecked, for not seeing Ethan's manipulative games. They needed a solution, fast. That's when the calls started coming in. First, it was a timid email from the board's chairman asking if I'd be open to a discussion. I ignored it. Then came the calls. Day after day, different board members reached out. They asked politely at first, then more desperately. Olivia, you know the company better than anyone. You're the only person who can fix this. You still care about Whitmore Industries, right? Oh, how the tables had turned. Months ago, they didn't even look me in the eye as they voted me out. Now they were practically begging. But I wasn't ready to forgive so easily. I left them hanging, letting them sweat while the company spiraled. Only after a full week of corporate bleeding did I agree to meet. Not at their office, of course. I made them come to me. We met in a private conference room at a boutique hotel downtown. When I walked in, every single board member stood immediately. Gone were the smug faces from months ago. They looked tired, desperate, and terrified. Olivia, the chairman began, his voice heavy with regret. We made a mistake. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch long enough to make them uncomfortable. Vanessa and Ethan, they're finished, he continued. We've suspended them indefinitely, pending the outcome of the investigations. The truth is, we need you. Only you can save Whitmore Industries. I leaned back in my chair, studying them. You didn't need me when you pushed me out, I said coldly. Why now? No one had a good answer. They shifted awkwardly, muttering about unforeseen circumstances and how things got out of hand. Pathetic. Still, I knew when to strike. If I come back, I said slowly, it's going to be my way. No interference, full authority, no more politics. They agreed instantly, too quickly. I pressed further. I also want written apologies from each of you, public statements admitting you were wrong to remove me, and Vanessa and Ethan's resignations, effective immediately and permanent. Their faces paled, but they knew they had no choice. One by one, they nodded. Done, the chairman said reluctantly. That night, official statements were released. The media had a field day. Olivia Whitmore returns to save the company, her sister. Tried to destroy. Headlines painted me as the prodigal daughter, returning to restore order. Investors breathed a sigh of relief. Clients slowly began to reconsider. Internally, however, the company was broken. Vanessa and Ethan had left behind a toxic wasteland of fear and resentment. Departments didn't trust each other. Employees felt betrayed and disposable. I spent my first week back simply listening. I held town halls, invited anonymous feedback, and asked one simple question. What do you need to heal? The responses were heartbreaking. People spoke about arbitrary firings, impossible quotas, and feeling like nothing more than pawns. I took notes. I promised change, and this time I meant it. My first major act was dismantling every policy Vanessa and Ethan had implemented. I rehired dozens of people who had been unjustly fired. I restructured the leadership team with people who actually cared about the company. I implemented transparency measures, ensuring no executive could hoard power behind closed doors again. Slowly, Whitmore Industries began to heal. The press called it the Olivia effect. Clients returned. Stock prices stabilized. Internally, the shift was even more noticeable. Laughter returned to hallways that had been silent for months. Ideas flowed again. People no longer feared speaking up. And I made one thing clear to everyone. This isn't my company. It's ours. Together we rebuild. But even as I restored Whitmore Industries, Vanessa's shadow still lingered. Though she and Ethan had been fired and publicly disgraced, I knew they weren't finished. People like them never go down quietly. One evening, weeks after my return, I received a package at my office. No return address. Inside was a single USB drive. Curious, I plugged it into my laptop. What I found made my blood run cold. Recorded. Phone calls, emails, and documents, all showing that Vanessa and Ethan had planned to sell off parts of Whitmore Industries to competitors before the scandal broke. They weren't just stealing money. They were planning to dismantle the company entirely and leave with golden parachutes. This wasn't just betrayal. This was treason against our family legacy. I sat in my chair long after the office emptied, staring at the evidence. For months, I had focused on saving the company. Now it was time to finish what I started. Vanessa thought she was done with me. She had no idea the real revenge hadn't even begun yet. The evidence on that USB drive changed everything. Up until now, my focus had been on saving Whitmore Industries and restoring what Vanessa tried to destroy. But seeing those files, hearing Vanessa's voice casually plotting to gut our company and sell it for parts, it ignited something far darker inside me. This wasn't just about getting even anymore. This was about making sure she could never rise again. I spent the next few days in silence, reviewing every detail of the files. Ethan and Vanessa had been planning this for months. Secret calls with rival companies, hidden shell corporations designed to funnel deals under the table, even tentative offers from competitors who smelled blood in the water. They weren't just greedy, they were predators, and they were willing to kill our family's legacy for a quick payday. The anger I felt was like nothing I'd ever known. But I didn't let it consume me. No, I used it. Methodically. Calculatedly. Vanessa still had her supporters, family friends, old board allies who believed she was simply misunderstood and deserved a second chance. Taking her down completely wouldn't be easy. I needed a plan that was flawless, a plan that would make her fall not just legal, but permanent. First, I reached out to a former ally, someone Vanessa had humiliated and discarded during her rise to power. His name was Leonard Crane, our former CFO. Smart, bitter, and eager for redemption. Leonard still had connections to regulators, auditors, and the press. I shared everything with him. At first, he was hesitant. If we do this, he warned, Vanessa won't just lose her position. She'll lose everything. Her name, her freedom, her future. Good, I said coldly. She deserves worse. Together, we crafted a strategy. Step 1 was leaking the sanitized version of the documents to financial watchdogs. This would trigger investigations into insider trading, fraud, and corporate espionage. Step 2 was contacting key investors privately. I let them know, off the record, that Vanessa had planned to sell off company assets, which would have left their investments worthless. Investors don't care about family drama. They care about money. And when they realized Vanessa had planned to rob them blind, their support for her vanished overnight. Step 3 was the public takedown. Leonard helped arrange a confidential interview with a trusted journalist who specialized in corporate scandals. We didn't rush it. We waited until investigations were officially launched and subpoenas were issued. Then, right as the media caught wind, we released the story. Whitmore betrayal. Vanessa Whitmore's secret plan to gut family. Empire for profit. The headlines were merciless. Overnight, Vanessa became a villain, not just inside the company, but to the entire industry. Investors sued. Regulators froze her accounts. Former allies ghosted her. And through it all, I remained silent. Watching, waiting. Ethan, unsurprisingly, turned on her almost immediately. He leaked his own documents, hoping to cut a deal with prosecutors. Vanessa was left alone to face the storm. Days later, she made the mistake I was waiting for. She called me, not as a sister, but as a desperate woman backed into a corner. "Olivia, please, we can fix this," she begged through the phone, her voice trembling. "You and me, we're family. Let's make a deal. Help me and I'll make sure you get everything you want." For a moment, I said nothing, letting her squirm, letting her believe there was still hope. Then, I said the words I had been holding back for months. "There's no deal, Vanessa. You made your choice the moment you betrayed me and this family. Now you can live with it." I hung up. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. Within weeks, Vanessa was indicted on multiple charges: fraud, insider trading, conspiracy to commit, corporate theft. Her assets were frozen. She was forced to sell her mansion, her cars, even her designer clothes just to cover legal fees. Ethan, meanwhile, vanished into obscurity after cutting his deal. The once glamorous power couple had become disgraced, broken, and forgotten. At Whitmore Industries, things were different. I solidified my leadership, continued rebuilding trust, and re-established the company as a leader in ethical business. Internally, employees cheered the news of Vanessa's downfall. They called me the real Whitmore, the one who protected what mattered. But I didn't celebrate. Not publicly. This wasn't about gloating. It was about restoring what had been stolen and making sure Vanessa could never hurt anyone again. Still, late at night, when the office was quiet and I sat alone in my glass-walled office, I allowed myself a small smile. The sister who once pushed me out and thought she could erase me was now erased herself, from the company, from the industry, and from the legacy she tried to steal. And I wasn't just back. I was untouchable. Weeks passed, and with each day, Vanessa's life unraveled more publicly and more humiliatingly. The media, once eager to photograph her on red carpets and corporate galas, now splashed her mugshot and court appearances across every headline. "From heiress to defendant," one read. "The Whitmore shame," said another. I didn't need to lift a finger anymore. The machine she had fed with lies and ambition was now devouring her whole. Watching it unfold felt surreal. I'd spent months crafting every step of her downfall, but witnessing it in real time wasn't as sweet as I thought it would be. It was sobering. Still, justice was being served, and that was enough. Ethan was already gone. After his deal with prosecutors, he quietly disappeared into some no-name consultancy job, forever tainted. No one in the industry wanted to be associated with him. Vanessa, however, faced a much crueler fate. She was broke, stripped of assets. Her so-called friends vanished overnight. She moved back into a small rental house far from the luxury she used to flaunt. Our father, furious and heartbroken, completely cut her off. For him, the betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. "You destroyed this family," he told her the last time they spoke, according to my mother. "You are no daughter of mine." That, I later realized, was the true punishment. Money could be regained, reputation could be repaired in time, but losing your family, being erased from the very legacy you schemed to steal, that broke Vanessa more than any courtroom could. Meanwhile, Whitmore Industries was thriving under my leadership. I finalized the internal reforms I started months ago. Toxic executives left, willingly or not. Departments were rebuilt, transparency enforced. Employee satisfaction hit an all-time high. Our stock rebounded, higher than ever. Investors praised the new Whitmore era, and clients returned in waves, eager to work with us again. But there was still one final chapter to close. My father had always dreamed of passing Whitmore Industries down to his children. For years, that dream had been poisoned, first by Vanessa's sabotage, then by the chaos that followed. I knew I had to fix that, not just for me, but for the legacy of our name. So, at our annual shareholders meeting, the same stage where Vanessa once stood, smug and victorious, I made my final move. Standing before hundreds of partners, investors, and employees, I told the whole story. Not the scandal version, the truth. How I had been betrayed. How I fought back. How I saved the company when everyone else abandoned it. "This company was built on values," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. "Respect, integrity, and resilience." Vanessa Whitmore forgot that. Ethan Cole never understood it. But every person sitting here today, you lived it. You rebuilt it with me. Together, we brought Whitmore Industries back from the edge. The room erupted in applause. Not polite, forced clapping, but genuine roaring approval. After the meeting, employees lined up to shake my hand. Board members, once ashamed of their cowardice, thanked me personally. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Weeks later, my father called me privately. His voice, though older and tired, was warm again. "I should have seen what she was," he admitted quietly. "But I see clearly now, Olivia. You are the future of this company and this family." Those words meant more to me than any business success. It wasn't about beating Vanessa anymore. She was finished. Forgotten. It was about proving to myself and everyone else that I was worthy. Not because I played dirty or schemed better, but because I never gave up on what mattered. Still, a small part of me remained wary. Vanessa was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. Even disgraced, people like her didn't just fade away. They festered. They plotted. I knew better than to believe she was gone for good. One rainy evening, as I locked up my office after a long day, I received a letter. No return address. Just my name, written in familiar handwriting. I opened it slowly, expecting some petty, bitter threat. Instead, it was just 5 words. You win. I lost. Goodbye. No signature. But I didn't need one. Vanessa had finally accepted her fate. Or maybe she was just disappearing to plot her next move. Either way, it didn't matter. I had already won. Whitmore Industries was mine. My father believed in me again. The company thrived and the people respected me not because I was ruthless, but because I had protected them when it mattered most. Vanessa's chapter was over. Mine was just beginning. I didn't rise through revenge alone. I rose because I stayed true to who I was. In the end, that's what destroyed Vanessa the most. Not the lawsuits, not the public shame, but knowing that I became everything she wanted to be, and I did it without becoming like her. With Vanessa gone, something strange happened. The anger that had fueled me for so long slowly began to fade. For months, every decision I made, every calculated move was about crushing her, making her pay, erasing her from the world she tried to steal. But now that she was out of the picture, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Whitmore Industries entered its most transformative period ever. Without scandal, fear, or toxic power struggles, we were finally able to focus on what mattered: innovation, integrity, people. I poured myself into rebuilding the company, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. For the first time, I wasn't driven by revenge. I was driven by legacy. My leadership style changed. The cold, calculated Olivia who had taken down Vanessa was still there, but softer, more human. I spent time on the floors, speaking directly with employees. I reinstated mentorship programs, encouraged creativity, and ensured promotions were fair and transparent. The shift was immediate. Departments thrived. Employees no longer looked over their shoulders. They trusted me. They trusted the company. Again. Our profits soared, but this time, success didn't come at the cost of people's well-being. We became known not just as a powerhouse, but as one of the best places to work in the industry. Competitors who once circled like vultures began losing ground. Clients who had hesitated now locked in long-term partnerships. Investors, seeing our stability and ethical practices, poured money back into the company. In less than a year, Whitmore Industries wasn't just back. It was better than ever. Still, I couldn't ignore the silence from Vanessa. Months passed, and aside from the short, bitter letter she sent, there had been no word from her. No attempts at redemption, no lawsuits, nothing. It was as though she had simply vanished. Occasionally, curiosity gnawed at me. What had happened to her? Was she plotting revenge of her own? Was she broken beyond repair? One afternoon, during a board retreat in Napa, I got my answer. An old family friend, unaware of our fractured history, casually mentioned seeing Vanessa working at a small consultancy firm overseas. She keeps to herself, he added, almost apologetically. She's not the same. I nodded politely but said nothing. Inside, though, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, pity, closure. Vanessa wasn't coming back. Not to Whitmore Industries, not to our family, not to this story. She was gone, living out her days in quiet obscurity, a far cry from the queen she tried to become. I thought about writing her back, saying something, anything, but I didn't. There was nothing left to say. Some endings don't need words. Back at headquarters, the team gathered for our annual company summit. It was my third year as CEO, and by now, my vision had become reality. Employees filled the auditorium, cheering and laughing. There was no fear anymore, only pride. I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces that had stood with me through the storm. "We've come a long way," I began, my voice steady. And it wasn't easy. There were moments when this company almost became something it wasn't meant to be. When greed, selfishness, and betrayal threatened everything we stood for. The room fell silent. Everyone knew who I was talking about, but I didn't need to say her name. But we survived. We rebuilt. And today, Whitmore Industries is stronger, kinder, and more united than ever. Applause erupted. I smiled, but inside I felt something deeper. Peace. Not the adrenaline rush of revenge, not the smug satisfaction of victory. Real peace. As the celebration went on, I slipped away to my office for a moment of quiet. I looked around at the space that had once felt cold and hollow. Now it felt warm, alive, mine. On my desk sat a small plaque a colleague had gifted me months ago. It read, "True leaders don't seek revenge. They rebuild." I traced my fingers over the words, letting them sink in. For so long, I had been defined by what Vanessa did to me, by what I lost, by how much it hurt. But sitting there, I realized something profound. She didn't make me. She didn't break me. She didn't define me. I did. My actions, my choices, my refusal to become like her. That was my legacy now. Outside my office, laughter echoed from the party. The company I rebuilt wasn't perfect, but it was good, honest, and it carried my name not as a trophy, but as a promise. Vanessa was gone, Ethan was forgotten, and I was exactly where I was always meant to be. I wasn't the victim, I wasn't the villain, I wasn't the avenger, I was the survivor, the builder, the leader. That night, as I locked my office, and stepped into the cool night air, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The past no longer owned me. I owned my future. A year passed. Then 2. And just like that, the chaos of those dark days became nothing more than distant echoes. Life had a strange way of moving on. Scars faded, new memories replaced old wounds, and people who once seemed larger than life became irrelevant whispers in conversations that no one cared to finish. Vanessa Whitmore? She was gone. Not dead, of course. But in every way that mattered. Forgotten. Occasionally, someone from the past would bring her up in passing. Whatever happened to Vanessa? They'd ask during casual dinners or networking events. The answer was always the same. She's gone. Not worth discussing. That was her legacy now. Silence. Meanwhile, mine grew louder than ever. Under my leadership, Whitmore Industries thrived like never before. Not just in profits, which were at an all-time high, but in culture. People loved working here. Creativity flourished, turnover dropped, and our name once again carried weight, not because of our history, but because of our integrity. Clients trusted us, partners respected us, competitors envied us. I had turned a battlefield into a sanctuary. Yet despite the success, I didn't live in victory laps. That's not who I was anymore. Power didn't thrill me like it once did. Revenge didn't fuel my mornings. What did? Legacy. Purpose. Building something no scandal, betrayal, or selfish sibling could ever destroy again. Late one evening, after another successful quarter closed and the office had emptied, I sat alone with my thoughts. The city lights blinked softly outside my window. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as I let the quietness wrap around me. This peace, this life, had been earned in blood, sweat, and strategy. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted by the journey. I felt proud. But make no mistake, I never forgot. The lessons Vanessa and Ethan taught me were burned deep into my bones. I learned how fragile trust can be. How quickly people turn when ambition clouds judgment. How even family can become your enemy if you let your guard down. But I also learned something far more important. I learned about resilience, about rebuilding after ruin, about standing tall even when the entire world tries to bury you. And most of all, I learned that success is the best revenge, but growth is the ultimate power. People who choose revenge often stay trapped in that cycle forever. They become bitter, hollow, obsessed. That could have been me. For a while, it was me. But in the end, I chose a different path. I chose to rise above. I chose to build, not destroy. I chose to create something so great, so undeniable that even my enemies became irrelevant shadows in my rearview mirror. That night, as I packed my things to head home, my assistant knocked softly and peeked in. "You're still here?" she asked, smiling kindly. "Long day?" "Not really," I replied honestly. "Just reflecting." She grinned. "Well, for what it's worth, you're the best CEO we've ever had. People love working here now. You made it feel like home again." That simple sentence stuck with me long after she left. Home. That's what I created. Not a kingdom, not an empire built on fear and deceit. A home. For myself, for my employees, for the future of Whitmore Industries. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face. The city, alive and buzzing, felt different. Or maybe I did. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't fighting ghosts. I wasn't proving anything to anyone. I had nothing left to prove. The world knew who I was. Olivia Whitmore. The woman they tried to erase. The leader they never saw coming. The survivor who became unstoppable. And as I walked away from that building, leaving behind the boardrooms and battlefields that once consumed me, I smiled softly to myself. Not because I won, not because they lost, but because in the end, I did what they couldn't. I became untouchable, without ever losing myself. That was my story now, and unlike theirs, mine was far from over.